So welcome to the January 22nd meeting of the Palo Alto Parks and Recreation Commission. If we could have a roll call to start, please.
Commissioner McCulley.
Present.
Commissioner Lemire.
Here.
Commissioner Cribbs. Here. Commissioner McDougall.
Here.
Commissioner Greenfield.
Here.
Commissioner Moss. Here. Commissioner Rechtel. Councilman Scharf.
And we might note that Councilman Scharf is probably not the delegate anymore, since he's not even on the council anymore. And we would look forward to whomever the new representative is. Does anybody have any comments, agenda changes, requests, deletions? And the next thing on the agenda would be any oral communications. Anybody who'd like to, from the public who'd like to speak on topics that are not on the agenda. If not, then I'll invite the department report.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. I'm Kristen O'Kane, Community Services. I do have some report outs from Darren Anderson, who is unable to make it to the meeting tonight. As soon as I find them, I'll be happy to share them with you. Okay, I will have to hold off on those because I don't see them now. But my only thing to report on right now is yesterday I'd like to thank everyone who came to our Martin Luther King Day of Celebration at Mitchell Park. It was a joint effort put on by Youth Community Service and our department in Community Services. And it's really the communities of East Palo Alto and Palo Alto coming together and celebrating the day of Martin Luther King and his sort of commitment to service and just really promoting service within the community. So both the mayor of East Palo Alto and Palo Alto spoke, and it was very well attended. It's always a great event, and a lot of youth are there and do performances, so it's a nice recognition day. The other item I just wanted to mention was this Thursday is our Cubberley Community Co-Design meeting, the third meeting, and we do have that on the agenda today, so you'll be hearing a lot more about it later on in the meeting, but I wanted to just remind everyone that's this Thursday at 7 p.m. at the Cubberley Pavilion. And that's all I have until I find Darren's.
If I could add, there's an online RSVP for that, probably.
There is an online RSVP just to give us an idea of how many people are coming. It's not required. We will also have a table dedicated for Spanish speakers and a table dedicated for Mandarin speakers and translated materials as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Is it Commissioner Moss?
I wanted to, I was hoping to hear from Darren that the new Rensville Pond has been filled for the first time. And I just wanted to make people aware that it's really big and the birds are already there. And hopefully in the Baylands Comprehensive Plan we can get some observation decks up so that people can actually see what we've done. And I also wanted to find out a little bit more about security around the pond. There's no fences yet or anything like that, so I just wanted to know what that was about.
So actually the person to report on that would be Karen, who happens to be here. So Chair, would you like a brief response?
I would invite Karen to come and
Okay.
talk to us briefly.
Hi, Karen, North Public Works. Is this on? Yeah. So the pond was completed between Christmas and New Year's. We turned the water on. It took quite a few days to fill the northern pond, and then it did spill over to the southern pond. The intent is the northern pond will be the area that's shallower, that will hopefully have the cattails, and then the southern pond is going to just be open water with the islands that you see that were part of the existing pond. It's actually, the footprint is pretty similar to the existing footprint. It just was so overgrown previously you didn't notice how big it was. And in terms of the security, Darren and Public Works team is working on a plan for basically securing the site with some rocks and also a swing gate. And there's also part of the Baylands comprehensive plan in terms of the trail access as well. So that's still in the works, but Darren is definitely working on that.
Okay, thank you.
It's done.
And Chair, I found Darren's reports, if you don't mind.
It appears that Darren has arrived late and now can speak.
I actually accidentally deleted his email. So one is on the Baylands Boardwalk project. It is on schedule to be completed by January 31st. Staff are planning a ribbon cutting event and will share with the Parks and Rec Commission once a date is set. The second is an urban forester update. Walter Passmore would like to confirm if you would like him to come to the February meeting. Walter is our city arborist, and he's been asked to come and give an update on the urban forest master plan. So we can talk a little bit more about that in agenda topics, something to think about as we get through this meeting and see what else we might have in February. And then the last thing that I know Commissioner Greenfield will be very happy to hear is that we have a new golf course bike rack will be installed by the end of this week. So.
Yes, Darren was careful, or made a point of notifying me on that. So very
Wonderful.
excited, yes. Okay. And now I'll have to make good on meeting people for lunch there now.
All right, and that's all I have.
I have one more.
Commissioner Moss?
One more. I also wanted to mention that the Coverly lights are now no longer trial basis, and I was surprised that they were going to. They started up again January 7th. I thought they were going to start up just a month before daylight savings time, February 15th. But I guess that was just for the trial. I'm a little surprised. There are very few kids using the field in the middle of January. So I'd like to revisit that if possible. It seems like a waste if there's very few kids.
I will speak with Adam Howard tomorrow and see if he has any data on how many people are using it. And I can't recall the exact dates that we said the lights would be on, so I'll look at that as well. And we might just bring the item next month for an update.
Yeah, thank you. Commissioner Greenfield?
If I could comment on that, as the turf liaison and working with the soccer community, a couple of things. One, when we approved the seasonal lighting plan, when the issue came before the commission last, we did set aside specific dates, and my recollection is we allowed the lights to be basically any time during normal non-daylight savings time, when the lighting, when it gets dark earlier. And I understand that at the very beginning of January there may not be a lot of usage of the youth teams, but that does gradually increase over time steadily, and the teams will be practicing out there. And I'm interested in if we bring this issue back to the commission. I'm interested in hearing what potential issues are with the plan that we have agreed on, and why we wouldn't allow the plan to run out through the seasonal period that we agreed on.
I think we should plan on having that back on the agenda. My guess is that part of the problem was there's been so much rain recently that even if there's lights, nobody wants to go and practice. I know all my grandchildren have had their soccer practice canceled, which is good for me because I don't have to drive to San Jose. But I think we could look at that. There was, if people are adding things, I just like to add that what Darren did also announce is that all of the signs that have been not there on Bixby are now in place. There's maps and there's informational signs and whatever, and I have profusely thanked Darren, and I'm sure you'll all thank me for stopping harassing in meetings about the signs that are there. I think we can come back to it later in terms of what we might add at the further agenda, but I think more about Bixby might be useful on the agenda too. If there are no other comments, Darren, then we have one speaker card, Griffin Willard, if you'd like to speak for a couple of minutes. There's a podium up there. I think it might be easiest for you to use.
Griffin Willard, resident. Using the Rinconada Park light system where you can turn it on for a certain allotted amount of time, is there any way that we could input this in the Cubberley field so there is not an excess of waste, but there is an amount of light that would be provided for people when they would like to use it during the season that it wouldn't already be on?
I'm going to suggest that the staff can look into that. I think to clarify what you said, is you're looking for an on-off switch so that it's only on when it's being used, basically. And I think that would be a trade-off with the amount you'd have to be paying staff in order to do that in terms of safe staffing. So I think we'll have staff respond to it, but we'll take the input. Thank you very much for offering the input.
So those lights aren't electric?
It's a timer now, I believe.
It's a timer now?
Isn't it, Commissioner Greenfield?
No, there is a means of turning the lights on and off via a remote app. I'm not sure if this can be done, how easily this can be done, but they are accessible in some manner.
And by,
We'll have to get more details.
yeah, we'll have to get more details so we understand exactly what the.
Okay.
And we have your contact information here.
Just quickly, if we could look into those lights electronically, because it is an app that can be on people's cell phones. So you probably know that. I had another question. Thank you. The golf course and the golf course website, how does that get updated and brought into 2019? Who's responsible for that?
Are you referring to the site through the city or the Baylands Golf
when you go
Links?
to the Baylands Golf website.
It's the.
Do they do it?
Our contractor does.
Okay,
Is there
I'll talk to you about it later.
Okay.
Thank you.
If there are no other questions or comments, we can get on with the business of number one, approving the draft minutes from the December 18th meeting. Does anybody have questions or comments or changes, or can I get a motion?
Motion to approve?
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? So the minutes are adopted as provided. The next item on the agenda is the election of the chair for 2019. In front of you, you have 2 ballots. The first thing we need to do, though, is have nominations. And so I would open the floor for nominations for the position of chair.
And Chair, could I ask you to briefly describe sort of the time commitment each month for being the chair and what the duties and responsibilities are.
Of course, I'd be happy to. So I would say that number one, the major responsibility is actually chairing the meeting. And that involves, number one, meeting and spending time with Kristen and the vice chair. And I would say that the vice chair this year, Commissioner Greenfield, has been really helpful relative to establishing what the agenda might be. There's some other, not so much obligations, but I think the position of chair should also be more actively involved in some of the other city functions and make sure that the commission is being properly represented. I do believe that the position of chair, not that all the other positions aren't challenging relative to topics, but needs to make sure that they have a handle on what the various topics are so that they can manage and control the conversations as they go on. I'm not going to pretend that that this is substantially more than many of the ad hocs. I know that many of the commission members are on really interesting ad hoc committees, and that those ad hoc committees can take an awful lot of time. So it's a very rewarding position. I can tell you that I have enjoyed it. I've enjoyed my relationship with Kristen, and I've enjoyed sitting here with all of you. And I hope it's been a good and rewarding year for everybody as well.
Thank you. And I have just a couple of procedural things, so if you don't mind, Chair.
Please.
Okay. So commissioners can nominate one commissioner at a time for chair. The commissioners must be present to be nominated, so Commissioner Rectal is not able to be nominated. And you may enter your own name if you choose to. And if you're nominating someone, you can also explain why you feel he or she would be qualified to be chair. And then the Chair McDougall, you'll ask if they accept the nomination. And then once all nominations are in, you'll ask for a motion to close the nominations.
And what I'd like to suggest is that we ask for nominations. Anybody who would like to offer a nomination just simply offers the name without an explanation. Once we know, once we have all nominations, then we'll go back through the list and let people comment on their nominations if that works. If there are no other procedural questions, then I would say it's open nominations for chair for 2019. Do I have any nominations? Commissioner Moss.
Commissioner McDougall.
Do I have any other nominations? I guess in response to the question of would I accept the nomination, yes, I would accept the nomination. Would you like, Commissioner Moss, would you like to comment?
In the past, I've been on the commission for over 3 years, and Commissioner Rectal has been several years, and before him, Commissioner Lowing has been chair for 3 or 4 years, I think, 3 years. Anyway, I think it takes a while to get into it, and I think that Commissioner McDougall has done a very good job so far of engaging the staff and running the meetings so they're not too long, but they have plenty of substance. So that's why I nominated him.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations? I think I would like to nominate Commissioner Greenfield. And I will ask him if he would accept the nomination.
I would accept the nomination. I'm frankly comfortable I would be comfortable in the chair position. I'd also be comfortable with you continuing for another year. I've appreciated the tone and organization that you've set for the group and working with you. And I also appreciate that the working as the chair might be a little bit less fun than working on some of the ad hocs. Getting stuck in the admin side a little bit more. So I'm really open to whatever is best for the commission.
So I would like to comment that I think that in terms of actively thinking about the city, thinking about the parks, thinking about the foothills and the baylands or whatever, Commissioner Greenfield puts an incredible amount of both emotional and intellectual energy into that, and I respect that and have enjoyed having him as my vice chair. If there are no other nominations, I would call for, do we vote on closing nominations? I call for a vote on closing nominations then. Do I need a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. So you have two pieces of paper in front of you. If you've torn them properly, the smaller piece has the ballot for chair. As I commented, I don't know why we have a euro symbol. I would assume we just simply fill in the whole euro.
The box did not print properly, so just circle the euro that works best for you.
Can I ask a
Sure.
question?
Yes. Yep.
I'm not sure. I'm interested to hear from Chair McDougall if you're interested in another term, and I'm not sure I heard you actually say you accept the nomination, but it's implicit. But
Well, no, I think I did respond to Commissioner Moss and say yes. I would tell you that I miss being on some of the ad hocs, but I think it's the responsibility of the chair to allocate the good ad hocs to people who are really qualified to do that. And but other than that, I'm happy to continue for another year. So yes, I accept the nomination. So I would suggest we continue with the voting. The way we should do this is just simply fill in the box, and Natalie will collect them one by one.
Vote for one, I presume.
Put the paper all the way back.
Yeah, and you could put in your preferences.
And Natalie will tally the votes. Very suspenseful.
Drum roll, please.
And Chair McDougall has won the election.
Well, thank you all very much for your confidence, and I look forward to taking advantage of what I've learned last year and making this into a really outstanding year for the Palo Alto Parks and Recreation Commission. Thank you. So now I'd like to open nominations for vice chair.
May I nominate Commissioner Greenfield, please?
Thank you. Commissioner Greenfield, do you accept the nomination?
I accept the nomination.
Do we have any other nominations?
I'd like to nominate Ann Chris, please.
Do you accept the nomination?
I think we have such a great candidate, Commissioner Greenfield, that I appreciate the compliment, but I would love to defer to him.
Do we have any other nominations? Do I have a motion to close nominations?
I move to close the nominations.
Second?
Second.
Everybody in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? So I'd like to congratulate Commissioner Greenfield on his new position as vice chair.
I think we still have to vote,
Do we?
I would imagine.
Yeah, we might be able to do it by voice.
Yeah, I would say we've
No,
done it.
I think we need to do it. We need to follow the procedure.
Okay. So the next item on the agenda, unless,
Can you wait for Natalie to make the announcement, please?
Commissioner Greenfield has won the election.
oh, surprise. Now I can congratulate you.
Well, if I may, I would like to thank both of you, not only for the work you did this past year. It has been a pleasure working with both of you. You've both challenged me, for sure, and I appreciate that, and I look forward to another year of working with the both of you.
Well, I'm sure we're excited to work with you.
Absolutely. I look forward to continuing another year and growing our relationship further.
If we have no, do you have your light on for a reason?
I do. I just wanted to thank you and Commissioner Greenfield for serving again and all of what you have learned. But I'd also like to thank the other commissioners at the table because I think everybody has done a fine job this year. So we appreciate working with you in the department. So I think it's going to be a good year again.
No, I think this is, I hesitate to use the word team, but I really do like the complementary nature of all of the people here and the work that they've done. And Commissioner Cripps, wait till you find out what ad hocs we find for you. So the next item is the Green Stormwater GSI, the Green Stormwater Infrastructure Plan. This is an update from the November meeting where we had a really interesting meeting and an awful lot of comments and questions. And I very much appreciate the fact that that you're coming back with a response. And I've seen the presentation you have, and I think it deliberately directly addresses the questions that were raised at the time. So thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for having us back. And yes, we did try to address a lot of the concerns and questions. So please feel free to question us again and challenge us to do even better. So we just finished recently our 85% draft version of what we call our GSI plan, our Green Stormwater Infrastructure Plan. We'll be making it available to the public this week, sending it out to various stakeholders and also putting it on our website. So we are going to address some of the concerns from last time, and we wanted to provide a detailed summary of the plan. Unfortunately, the agenda's pretty packed, so we have some limited time. We wanted to just go over a couple of things, and hopefully in the context of providing some information about the plan, also address your questions. When we were here in November, we wanted to tell you a little bit about the progress we had done when we were developing the plan. We gave broad strokes over the challenges that we had identified and the proposed solutions that we had included in the plan. You wanted more specifics. We're here to provide more specifics, to provide a little bit more about our funding ideas. You mentioned habitat, you mentioned trees, so I wanted to tell you a little bit more about that. One item about the plan is out of the 15 chapters, there's one chapter that goes in detail over how we've prioritized project locations for potential GSI projects or green stormwater infrastructure. And these are locations that the city owns. So we only focused on city-owned projects. The first step that helped us prioritize project locations was the SWRP, or the Stormwater Resource Plan. It was done by the Santa Clara Valley Water District and SCVRP, which is a long acronym for the Santa Clara County Stormwater Program, basically. They help to create for each municipality in the planning region, in this black planning region. Okay, I thought I was going to show you with a cursor, but it's not there. There was a prioritized list for each city for both parcels and streets. So we used the parcel list and started with that and built upon that to have a pretty lengthy list of parcels that the city owns, very small to pretty large, like City Hall. We came up with some criteria that we thought would work well for the city, using some of what was used for the Stormwater Resource Plan, and then also some that came from staff conversations of other important criteria. We allocated values to that criteria, and then we were able to assign priorities to each project location after assigning the value, after assigning criteria, allocating the values, and then totaling those values. So what does that mean? Is this. We wanted to give you an example of a couple of criteria. One criteria is project status. Basically, we've divided it up into two different categories. One is whether it's whether there's a planned project at this location, and whether it's included in the adopted capital budget. So if it's already planned and there's already interest from another department, we gave it higher value than if it's not, there's no project planned at this location. Another criteria was if there's a proximity to an existing bikeway or a safe route to school. Per the bike ped plan, we're really focusing on trying to bring connectivity to the city. So if there was a project location that already had a bikeway or a safe route to school, we gave it less value because we want to have more bikeways. GSI brings a lot of safety features as well, as we talked about last time, so we gave it a higher value to give it a higher priority. So those are examples of two criteria. When you look at the plan, you can see the other criteria that we used. And what resulted was this list of parcels that we gave a priority to. And just to let you know, some we just pulled out of the whole list because it just didn't make sense to put a project there. It's just too small, or there were some other reasons that just didn't work. So for the 85th percentile, we assigned it a high priority. There's 29 locations where we think projects can happen. Out of those 29, there's 3 that are parks. 25th percentile, we gave it a low priority. And in between, we gave it the medium priority. So as you can see, most of parks align with the medium priority. And the reason that is because some of the criteria that we looked at, for example, areas that tend to generate more trash got a higher value because we want to put projects there so we can collect more trash. Parks don't tend to have as much trash. They are considered medium generating or moderate generating areas. We looked at groundwater recharge areas. Projects that were in project locations that were in groundwater recharge areas received a higher score. We looked at those that were what we called key development areas. So downtown, the Cal Ave area, the south of Forest Avenue. Those that were within those areas received a higher value. So in terms of how the criteria played out, a lot of the parks ended up having medium priority. Now, this is based on, one thing that I really want to stress is that it's based on unbiased criteria because we wanted to present that to both staff and the public for comments, and we also want to present this to the Water Board to show them that we have an unbiased process in place that we might be able to use in the future as well. And so this is phase one. Phase two will be after we receive comment from staff, public as well, but in particular staff, because then we'll find out what staff might have in mind that's not explicit in the CIP budget book, for example. And then we might change some of those priorities around. We've gotten some comments already about a couple that are in the medium priority that will probably be moving up to high. And just to give you a sense of how these projects are, this is a very broad scale map. Red is high priority, orange is medium, green is low. When you look at the plan in the appendix, there's a lot of different maps that we've created, GIS-based maps that show all the different criteria in map base. And also, you can zoom into these different quadrants and see which locations have been assigned a particular priority based on this phase one vetting process. Okay. So moving on, I think we talked about a little bit regarding the requirement that we have to integrate GSI language and a method to identify GSI project potential in all our planning documents for the city. And so we've identified two that we consider higher priority that we want to focus on first. One is the bicycle and pedestrian transportation plan, and the other is the storm drain master plan. So because the bicycle and pedestrian transportation plan really provides a lot of opportunities for us to create more green streets, as I've mentioned last time, such as the Charleston Arrested Corridor project, when we can really get more bang for our buck, for our budget, where we can create safety features and bring multiple benefits just by bringing GSI to streets. So we think highly considering GSI when there's a bike ped project that's being considered, we think that's really important. Because there is no set date for the next update, we suggest doing some kind of interim policy that will direct staff to consider GSI during the project scoping process. Same thing for Storm Drain Master Plan. It identifies priorities for updates to the traditional stormwater storm drain infrastructure. So we think that we should be considering GSI at the same level that we're considering traditional infrastructure, so that we can treat smaller storms with GSI and not just focus on putting in more pipes. And so I think there's a way that we can look at both. And there are going to be times where all we can do is put in pipes because that would be the best solution. But we think that we should kind of encourage everyone to look at the system a little bit different. And as we mentioned before, we're really trying to create a change throughout the city of getting folks to have GSI at the forefront. So that's one way. We have some great opportunities right now because there's two plans that one of which you're about to hear about, and the other is going to be done next year. And both of these areas provide an amazing amount of opportunity for us to integrate GSI throughout the property. The North Ventura planning area, there is Matadero Creek right there. There's a park right there. Both of those need improvements. And so I think it provides an opportunity for the public to give comments, to ask, to provide feedback. And I think what we do at staff is participate in meetings and try to talk to staff to get the kind of the scope broadened and consider GSI. The sea level rise policy is going to go to council this year, and we've integrated GSI language in there, and there will be a plan coming up in the next couple of years, and we'll be looking at how to address sea level rise with various solutions, including GSI. And the last is the Tree and Landscape Technical Manual that you may have heard about. That's being updated and will hopefully be finalized this year. And we're working very closely with Urban Forestry to address how we can not just integrate GSI into these manuals, but how to start considering tree plantings as another way to bring GSI to streets. There was a comment made last time about lack of the city measuring performance at GSI facilities, and we agree we need to do better. And so we're going to start doing that by with our maintenance and monitoring plan. We're going to go out to all our GSI facilities and assess how effective they are, how well they're performing, and change the way we do maintenance so that they can be more effective. We're going to have software to track these sites, to track how often they're being maintained and how well how effective they're being over time. We're going to provide a lot more project oversight. And in the plan, we're proposing a performance rating tool so that we can track how well these sites are performing over time based on the information that we're going to start collecting with our monitoring techniques. And then we can provide some information to the public. And also, when we're trying to get grants, we can show how well these sites are performing. In terms of funding, we have a lot of work to do. But I did want to present some of what we're doing so far. This pie chart shows how the current stormwater fee is allocated. Other includes staffing, the storm drain system maintenance, emergency response, debt service, and 24% is the upgrades to the traditional storm drain system, and 7% is for GSI. That 7% is intended for construction or for programs, but not for maintenance. So the great news is that we have some money to leverage getting more funds. But we need to get funding for if we want to see more GSI facilities, and definitely if we want to be able to maintain them, because it doesn't make sense to construct them and then ignore them or not appropriately maintain them. So we need more funding for that. And so we've identified the need. We have currently a contract in place, and hopefully by May we'll have an initial assessment done. And that's intended to help us look at what kind of fees are in place right now, how they were set up, what kind of nexus study was done, and so that'll help us determine what our long-term plan will be. A long-term plan may involve surveys, may involve maybe a nexus study for our own fee. So that's to be determined, but just to let you know, we're in the works and we can provide updates as we go along. And for implementation, I just wanted to share that about what our staff is doing, because in reality, our team of two is working hard on GSI planning, and that's why we need support from consultants, but that's why we're also working really hard to try to foster a culture change throughout the city so that we can get support from out the departments. When we update our plans, when we have different policies in place, and when we help educate everyone to understand the multiple benefits of this GSI, then we'll have additional support. But we are also building our skills. Staff created a lot of the maps that are in the plan. We're having a lot of meetings, and we're trying to facilitate a lot of different conversations between departments to make sure that when plans are being reviewed and when we're scoping projects, that different departments are really talking to each other. And in terms of increasing habitat, one thing that I don't think we addressed was when we're doing the stormwater code update that's going to go to council in April, we're also requiring that all new projects and redeveloped projects, or projects that require a building permit, they have to meet a lot of different requirements, and one of those is that they have to have bay-friendly landscaping practices. So that means that they have to use integrated pest management, they can't use pesticides, they can't use herbicides, they have to focus on using a lot of mulch and compost, using drought-tolerant and native plants. And not only do they have to do that for the initial design, but they're supposed to be doing that from that point on. And when we do inspections of businesses, we can check on what's happening with this. So we are going to relook at the plant palette internally, and so we can consider how we can increase habitat as well. This plan focuses on public property, on city-owned property, but we are going to look further, once this plan is accepted, on how we can create more GSI on private property. And some things that we're considering and we're putting forth as ideas in the plan are perhaps to decrease the size threshold that triggers requirement for GSI on private property, creating an alternative compliance program where if there's going to be a development and it's lot line to lot line and stormwater treatment can't fit on site, perhaps that applicant either pays a fee toward a fund that helps construct or maintain public GSI, or perhaps they construct GSI on our public right-of-way next to their project. That could come about in different ways. We need to really dig in and figure out how to make that happen. Another thing is that there's requirements from public works, from utilities, from transportation, a lot of times for private projects, that there have to be improvements in the street and sidewalks, and sometimes with infrastructure. And so if those improvements are already happening, then we should look at how we can also require GSI installations. It does bring in some questions of who will maintain those features. So that's why we're not jumping into making those requirements. We need to dig into it deeper. And finally, January 2019, we're here. We're meeting with the Planning and Transportation Commission next week. We're meeting with the Stormwater Oversight Committee. As I said, we're making the 85% plan public. We're hoping to receive comments next month. We'll follow up with a 100% draft, and after that's out for review, we're going to have a public meeting, and then hope to have some final comments, and then in May, release the final plan. We're hoping to go to council at the end of May for acceptance of the plan by City Council. Hopefully, it won't go past the end of June or so, but we've added some kind of extra time in case we need to go back. So that's it.
So I agree. I think you did a nice job of addressing many of the questions we brought up. I'm going to open the floor to the commission relative to anybody who has questions. I'll start with Ryan.
Do you mind going back just really briefly to the slide that showed the percentiles, the number of projects? So maybe I'm misunderstanding, but it seems as though the percentile number doesn't relate to the number of projects column. Is that right?
The percentile column actually relates to some information we're not providing, but it is in the plan. It relates to the total value that each project location receives. So let's say the highest value was 35 points because for each of those criterias, there was a point allocated for each criteria, and I don't know, we had 10 or 12 type of criteria. So then we added those values, gave a value to each of those project locations, and then we looked at the 85th percentile out of that kind of range of values.
Sure, so you have more than 15% of the projects in the 85th to 100 percentile, right?
Right.
Okay, understood. Which are the 3 parks that fall into that high priority? Do you know?
That is a good question. I will be asking my teammate over here. She'll look it up, and we can
come
provide
back
that to you.
Thank you.
Do you have readily available information or for private property owners, or will there be information available to them if they want to go ahead and pursue some GSI projects on their own, not through redevelopment, not through any sort of force from the city or fear of penalty, but just as through their good-natured citizenship and wanting to help the Baylands and so forth?
I'm assuming you're talking about commercial, industrial, or any type?
I'm actually referring more to private property owners, existing private property owners want to pursue a project.
Okay.
For GSI. Will you have available resources or ability to direct them or recommend native plants or whatever might be appropriate?
We do have some resources that we provide. They're county-level resources that are provided to folks who need to meet the requirements. It would make sense that those same resources be shared so that we can have similar consistency for design and construction. If it's something more simple, like just wanting to keep runoff on site or something like that, we do have some other resources that don't have to meet engineering specifications. We do have a rebate program. I don't know if you know, we have a rebate program for, I don't know the actual rebate amounts. I think it depends on the type of green infrastructure that is installed, but it's for rain cisterns, pervious pavement, and Karen, do you know the rebate program is for pervious pavement, cisterns, and I know there's one other item, but I don't remember what it is. Currently, we don't fund rebates for bioretention areas, and that's something that we're going to look further into.
So also rain barrels and green roofs.
Green roofs, right. I don't believe we've ever provided a rebate for a green roof. But I think that's a good idea, to provide additional support. We do have a new landscape architect in urban forestry, and she'll be working with us to inspect GSI features during construction. And so I'll provide that feedback to them to see if they might be able to help out with that too. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm glad you left that slide up because I had a question about it as well. So could we find out what the 22 parks that are on that list? That would be really interesting. And then I wasn't able to come to the meeting in November, so I missed the whole thing, and I'm trying to catch up. So if you went into one of those parks, either the one on the top tier or the medium tier, what would happen at the park when you decided to utilize this program?
Well, first, just to address those top 3 parks, since I have those right here.
Good.
They are Greer Park, Mitchell Park, and Pierce Park.
What was the first one?
Greer.
Greer. Thank you.
So in terms of the 22 parks, maybe I can have Isabel put it up on the computer.
So
if you
that
wanna
would be
see the
great,
list
or
of
if
22
you could
parks.
show us where to get to that map that was there. It's not in the attachment for our agenda, at least I didn't find it, so,
No, well, it's in the plan itself.
okay.
And so we've
So we
I'm
find
not
the
sure if we
plan, we'll see
provided
the
a link
map.
to you, but we can provide a link.
Okay.
Can we send a link to them?
And so just, you don't have to do anything for all the parks, but just take one park and say, okay, this is what happens to this park.
It would really depend on the type of park and the location. So it could be anywhere from a small project, like, for example, if a parking lot is being replaced, then we could consider putting some kind of green stormwater infrastructure, either maybe just a bioretention area, maybe adjusting the way it drains so that it all drains to a bioretention area. We could even adjust the way it drains so that it just drains to landscaping instead of the street. That's not as engineered as a bioretention area, but in a sense, it
Okay.
meets a lot of the same requirements. It could be a larger project, if there's enough room and enough public support, where maybe we capture rainwater and reuse it for irrigation. But that would have to be a pretty large project where we would put underground tanks.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you for the updated presentation. I had a question regarding the priority for near bikeways versus not near bikeways. So the GSI gets higher priority if it's not near a current bikeway or safe route to school. And is that because of the inherent conflicts in the paths, or I'm trying to understand the reasoning better?
The reason is because, for example, if we wanted to put additional bioretention, like at Middlefield and Kellogg, it's a perfect example because it was put in as a bike ped safety project. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that.
Not sure about that one, but go ahead.
Okay, so basically they put in some safety features. They put in some what's sometimes called bulb outs or bump outs, but there are also bioretention areas.
Okay.
So that before was not a safe biking area. Now, if we had considered it in terms of priority, we would have given it a higher priority because it didn't have a safe bike area, but it was in the bike ped plan as a planned bike project. If it's a park, for example, a lot of parks already have bikeways or bike lanes that are around the park. And so we consider that very positive, but in terms of putting it on a priority list, we want to put it lower on the priority list because there's already bikeways there. Whereas a park that doesn't have any bikeways, or any location that doesn't have any bikeways, we might want to use GSI and also bring a bike safety feature, and then add more connectivity to the city.
I see, so the prioritization is really based on expanding the overall network of bikeways.
Yes.
Okay, and then my next question, which you've sort of answered, is, and it's sort of dovetailing on on Ann's questioning. I'm still kind of struggling to envision, to see the big picture, just to see what these examples are, and in particular for the bikeways and the safe routes. So could you just describe some of the GSI techniques or methods, or what the infrastructure changes would be, and what it would look like for bikeways?
Sure. And I apologize, I don't have more examples. We only have 20 minutes on the agenda,
Sure,
so we
that.
couldn't bring too much more.
You can blame me.
But I'm trying to think of, let's say, Mitchell Park, as you already know, has a lot of GSI. And what we call GSI at that park is, one, it has a green roof. That's a pretty typical type of green stormwater infrastructure. It is, however, pretty expensive to maintain, and that's something that I had mentioned before, so it's not, in terms of projects we're dying to do, we're not dying to do that one, but it is a type of GSI, and it's something we'll consider when there's appropriate funding. That site also has some pervious pavement, and not where the driving lanes are, because that tends to get clogged pretty fast, and that's harder to maintain, but in some of the parking stalls, right across from the cafe. If next time you go, you'll notice that it's a different kind of pavement, and that's because it's pervious. Those stalls are pervious, and underneath are what's called suspended pavement systems. And they hold soil. They also allow the water to infiltrate through that pavement, go into the suspended pavement systems, and go into that bioretention area that's in that median. So that median is a bioretention area. It's capturing all the runoff from not the roof, but all the parking lot and any other of the hardscape, including the sidewalks. So that's pervious pavement, that's a green roof, and that's a bioretention area. So those are three types. Now, that's a very large project. I'm not necessarily suggesting that we would put that at all parks, because that's pretty expensive. The reason they did that was initially because they were required, and then they went above and beyond, and now it's a pilot project. It's a great project. There's a smaller example at Rinconada, where there's a small bioretention area right by the library. It receives rainwater from the parking lot, and it also receives pumped groundwater from the basement of the art center. So that provides two different benefits.
Thanks. Just briefly, could you elaborate on some of the bikeway GSI?
Sure. Aside from the Middlefield Kellogg, there's some improvements that we need to make in terms of bikeways.
What ideas are?
Just in general?
Not necessarily what's implemented right now, but what could be implemented.
Well, the best thing is to put bulb outs. That's basically, let's say there's a parking lane. You would build out an area where it would help slow down traffic. And we actually showed
You're
it,
reducing the pavement.
reducing the
by
pavement,
using
slowing
bulb
down
outs.
traffic.
Of course. But I'm just trying to-
Allowing areas for a pedestrian walkway.
Okay.
And schools are great areas for that, so.
Thank you. And you mentioned, just changing subjects real quickly, GSI currently is getting 7% of the storm drain fees from the city. About what kind of number are we talking about overall for the budget?
For GSI construction, it's $380,000 a year. For that rebate program that we discussed and any other fees that can go maybe toward helping us hire a consultant to do more additional work on a funding analysis, for example, that's $125,000.
Okay. Thank you.
Piggybacking on what Commissioner Lemire said, I would hope that you could work on the private side as quickly as possible. I understand you've got a lot to do for the city side, but it seems like it's more controlled. You have more control over the city side, and you have less control over the private side. And it's going to take longer, and it's going to be more of a hassle. And so if you could start on that a little bit, I know that the city side will get done, but the private side is so important. There's so much more. Is there a chance that we won't have any stormwater reaching the Baylands when you're all done? Because I noticed, I rode my bike by there today, and there's beautiful lake now because of all that rain, and it's always much lower or non-existent in the summer.
I would say there's a chance to greatly decrease that stormwater runoff. Anything is possible, but it comes at such a great cost. It's probably not going to happen. But if we can do a lot to keep runoff on site, and even if everyone can get their neighbors to disconnect their downspouts, we could just make little changes along the way.
Okay. And then when I love the pervious pavement at Mitchell Park, my library, my park, and I guess what you're saying that the priority is more like, say, Cal Ave, which has a whole lot of parking spaces, that you would be able to someday punch holes in all of underneath all of those parking spaces to allow more water to just go into go below there, without having to tear up all the concrete and replace it with pervious pavers. Is that doable?
To punch holes in pavement?
Yeah.
Well, it really depends what kind of soil is underneath and how permeable it is. This probably wouldn't go over well with the engineers. I doubt it will help pavement last very long. But I understand your idea of trying to be creative and doing the most we can with a small budget.
And that's your priority, is those areas like Cal Ave and like University Ave. Is that what I heard you say?
That tends to come out as higher priority. The city owns a lot of unpaved, uncovered parking lots. And those came up really high in the list of priorities. Of course, that's not based on feedback, but based on our unbiased criteria. They're hollering for us to come and put some GSI.
Okay.
Yeah, that was North Carolina coming out there.
As opposed to paved ones like Cubberley parking lot. So hopefully, as you mentioned, in the Cubberley master plan, when you redo Cubberley, you'll put pervious pavement in all the parking areas that remain. Is that the plan?
Well, we don't have a plan for any specific type of GSI feature. Pervious would be one of the items we would consider.
Yeah, okay. And then all of this, the elephant in the room is the groundwater pumping when you have construction. Does your plan address that at all, or is that totally separate?
It is totally separate.
Oh, boy. Yeah. So we just have to keep working that other side to keep them from pumping
Right.
all the water that they're pumping now, because that's sort of counterproductive to everything you're doing.
I understand your
Can I comment on that? 'Cause,
Yes.
and that's one of our many hats, actually, is the groundwater pumping as well. So within the Environmental Services Division. So we are working on that. If you have noticed that the dewatering rules and regulations got changed significantly, you'll see that, at least for residential, we're definitely seeing a decline in the amount of groundwater that's being pumped during a residential basement construction, because they're utilizing groundwater cutoff walls or secant walls now. So we are working on that by restricting and strongly encouraging reuse of that water. But yes, we will still be dealing with that for time to come.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
So,
Chair,
go ahead.
Chairperson,
Yes,
am I allowed to ask a question to,
sure, of course.
you mentioned the private project opportunities and you wanted us to move forward on that. I was just wondering if you had any specific type, no? Okay.
No, I just know that we have a tremendous amount of construction going on right now, and it sure would be nice if they had some of these in mind, and even if they were forced to do it, but you're saying that those kinds of regulations are not in place yet, and so therefore, they have to do it out of the goodness of their heart. And I noticed that an abbreviation in your report that had no description called LID, and it says Low Impact Design. So if you could spell that out, I would appreciate it. But I'm assuming that people know, developers know about these things, even if it's not required.
Well, and actually, private properties are required to meet some of the our stormwater permit requirements if they develop at least 10,000 square feet of impervious surface. If it's a restaurant or a parking lot or shopping center, that's 5,000 square feet or more impervious surface. Both of those type of categories have to put in stormwater treatment or what's called GSI.
Oh, good.
So there are some requirements in place. We would just like to see if we can create more opportunities.
I guess I have one more question, and that is, where can a homeowner go to learn about these things? Because we spent a whole lot of money taking the water off of our roof and away from the walls so that we didn't get cracking and shifting. But it went out to the street because that's where you put it. But it would have been better if we had spread it out to the rest of our property and away from the buildings. But nobody knows about those things. So is there anywhere that, any kind of communication that's coming out of your group, your staff?
So we do have a website, cityofpaloalto.org/GSI, on which we've posted information about these requirements, and the GSI plan will be going on there this week. And we'll add some links, and I think we already have some links on there to some other resources that exist with information for residents.
So I want to thank you again. I think, number one, I appreciate the fact that we rushed you in terms of content. And I would remind everybody that there was 2 presentations that came out. The first presentation had an awful lot of the information that would supplement some of the things you said, and I think that that's valuable. Can you go to the one slide that had your timeline on it? Yeah. So you're talking to PRC, Planning and Transportation, and the Stormwater Committee, right? I don't know if the Architectural Board would help you relative to the kind of things that Commissioner Moss was asking about, but I would think it would be worth at least talking to them to find out. From the 11/27 meeting, I do think you've answered a lot of the questions. There was an awful lot of conversation about trees at the time. I'm not sure that did come back as much as might have, but I don't know that was necessary. There was a lot of talk about rooftop, and your point is rooftops are good. One, in terms of what they do initially, it's the cost of maintaining them, because then you have to get water to them and everything. At the time, I invited the commission, and I would invite you to visit the Facebook rooftops. Commissioner Rectal went up with me the last month, and that's a really interesting thing to do, and it's quite amazing how much natural structure there is up there, and the size of the trees and whatever. It's pretty impressive, and I would again reiterate, send me a message saying you want to go, and we'll arrange that. The other conversation was about purple pipe. That came up in the conversation last time, and I think and the other question from last time was Commissioner Greenfield at the end said, what can we do to help? And I think I would repeat what he said the last time. This all sounds right, but it sounds like you're doing a very difficult pushing this ball up the hill kind of thing with the amount of staff, the amount of money, and whatever else. And so I think it's going to depend on collaboration. And maybe that's the one place we can be vocal about collaboration. You need collaboration with urban forest. You need collaboration with planning. You need collaboration all over the place because you can't do it alone. And I think we could commit to, at least when somebody comes before us, too bad for the Coverly people who come next, that we will ask about GSI whenever we have those kinds of presentations. And I think that would be the kind of contribution that maybe we can make. Other than that, I think we should find a time in the future to invite you back and continue the updates, because I think this is important to the kind of natural infrastructure of the city that we're interested in. So thank you for coming back. Thank you for attempting the short time, and I know it was challenging for you to move that fast.
Thank you. And I do have a question. I don't know how your ad hocs work, but would it make sense to involve one of your ad hocs a little bit more in depth with this work?
So we have a retreat coming up, and one of the things we do at the retreat is we agree on what the priorities are for the next year, and therefore what ad hocs we should have. I'll commit that we'll add that to the list of conversation and come back to you on whether we can put together an ad hoc that would work on that with you. Okay, good idea. Thank you.
Chair McDougall, I can make another suggestion too, if you're really interested. The Stormwater Oversight Committee is actually writing a letter to the City Council supporting the Green Stormwater Infrastructure Plan. So if that's something that maybe when you're going to your retreat, the Parks and Rec Commission could do as well. So that also helps us get it through City Council.
Thank you for that suggestion. I think that we would want to get full commission agreement on doing that, and I'll put that forward. Thank you. If there's nothing else and no other comments.
Just have a quick question regarding the idea of an ad hoc for GSI that would require staff support and a liaison of some sort. So I'm assuming that's implicit with that is implicit with the offer or suggestion.
Any other comments or questions? If not, thank you again, Pam, and we'll move on to the next conversation. I thought that was well done.
Good evening. Nice to see you all again. It's been a while.
Ooh, sorry about that. So I'd like to introduce our next item. To my left is Bobby Hill. She's with our consulting firm Concordia, and you've met Bobby before. We thought, especially since she's in town for our community meeting Thursday, that it would be a great opportunity for her to come and share with you the progress we've made so far, summary of our first two community meetings, and what we have planned for the next phase of our master planning effort. So I'm going to turn it over to Bobby for the presentation.
Great. Thank you so much. So I'm delighted to be here this evening and to give you a detailed update of where we are with our planning thus far. One very important thing to note is that in the beginning, the project just covered the Coverly site. At the first meeting, there were a handful of people who specifically came up and mentioned that why would it not be a good idea to also include Greendale and 525 site. So we're happy to say that the school district agreed that that was a good idea, and that really has allowed us a bigger footprint, and I think an opportunity to really address the ideas and concerns in a way that's going to be, I think, quite wonderful. So that's where we are with that. So our co-design process is well underway. We have finished our programming phase, and I will hand this to you when we're done. I have a brief summary of a roughly 150-page document that is our programming document that I believe you all have a link to, and it's also on the project website. But this that I'll share with you this evening highlights that phase of the work. So in meeting one, you see here from the activity the ideas that rose to the top. You can see community garden, pool, wellness center, and on down the list. After meeting one and after that analysis, we brought that back to people, and then we also asked folks to consider not only the programs that are there that we know are very popular, but also what opportunities there were for new programs. So as a result of the second meeting, a number of programs additionally rose to the top. And then again, this is one of the meetings where the whole notion of the Greendale site, and in particular also the adult education, which is spread, I believe, amongst 7 to 9 different facilities all around, not consolidated, makes it a lot harder to manage. It was a recommendation to bring that all on the Coverly site. So again, meeting 1 and 2, we focused on the programming aspect of it, and then this resulted in our programming document, and I will share that with you all. Where we look at, again, the existing uses, what is there and what people wanted and how they wanted to see some of these expanded onto the Greendale site. And then we looked at the new programs that people wanted. And in this particular slide, the blue designates the indoor spaces and the gray designates the outdoor spaces. And I'll share in more detail a little bit about that later on. So this is the programming document that is now set, but I want to note that the program that people say they want now, also we have to consider the life of this site for the next 50, 60, 70 years. So one of the key elements of this design process is to also consider maximum flexibility in the design of those spaces and the adjacencies and things, because we know that something might be there for a few years, and 10, 20 years down the road, it might be something very different. So we did also at those meetings, we had an aspect of really trying to understand people's tolerance for massing, for density, for what that would mean in terms of laying the site out, and also considering the programs that are there and all of the footprint that they have and how we might be able to be more creative in managing that square footage and also bring greater green space back to the area, which we heard very strongly from people. So yes, maximizing green space, preserving the fields, using underground or structured parking, and a tolerance for building heights between 2 and 4 stories, and an interest in courtyards and possibly occupiable roofs. And then in the second meeting, we actually, I'm sorry, that was jumping ahead of me. We wanted to, based on, I'm sorry, it's moving by itself. we took those ideas and brought them to everybody in three concepts, if you will, sort of along a spectrum. So an independent campuses between the city and the school district, a shared village, and a building in a park. And people gave us their ideas about that, their preferences, what they did like, what they didn't like about that. And we ranked those, and then based on that ranking and all of those comments, the shared village concept was one that was really more preferable to everybody. So that's really where we are at this point. So while we've established the program, we are now going to bring this revised shared village design, concept design, if you will, to the meeting on Thursday, and we'll be focusing in three areas. The program organization and massing. So we have considered many things in terms of the program organization and massing. We've considered the property and the programs that are strictly city-run and operated. We consider properties that would involve shared use between the city and the school district, and then also future priorities for the school district to potentially have a school and even potentially move the district offices onto this site. And then another thing that came up a lot in the conversations in the past two meetings was also consideration for workforce housing for staff, education staff. So here we are with the plan as it stands right now. And this, what you're seeing here, would be what the site would look like prior to any new school development on the site. The decision from the school district, in particular for building a school on this site, is something that would probably come much farther down the road. So what you see here in blue are what we would consider the city programs. The purple is the shared use. And then as we go into this, I'll share with you right here. So the Health and Wellness Center is here. Visual arts, gyms, 2 gyms actually, a makerspace and workshop, a performing arts and cafe, a redo of the Greendale Elementary School and the adult school. Right now, the adult school does have some programs over at the Greendale, but this would allow them to move a lot of their programs there, a lot of their administrative staff there, and then also to utilize the shared facilities in Coverly. For instance, the makerspace would be one in particular that, that they would probably use. We also have a multi-use event space and kitchen. And then you see there would be the school footprint in the red. The building, the long rectangular building that's the farthest to the left would be the relocation of the district offices. And then over on San Antonio, the yellow blocks that you see could potentially be housing. And then we'll focus now on what we're talking about for the outdoor spaces. So in the plan thus far, we're able to preserve the existing soccer and softball fields. We have a small skate park. There's lots of talk about bringing pickleball courts there, so we have that. We have a playground, we have tennis courts, a small dog park, and a pool. We have an outdoor exercise area that's also located very near the health program, an amphitheater, flexible garden space, the child care play area for the child care programs that now are functioning at Coverly, a central promenade that runs through the building, through the campus, and then a school quad and an outdoor cafe and seating, and then playground for the Greendale program. So if you look to the left, you'll see the existing site right now, and what we have in terms of parking and access roads and building footprint. And with the design that we have now, we actually have increased the green space very significantly. We actually now have 59% more green space than we did before. We have a smaller building footprint with over double the indoor area. So we're actually able to potentially bring all of the programs that exist at Coverly now, and in addition to that, all the new programs that the community members have said that they want, and in addition to that, potentially have a school and the district offices and then the housing. So what we're going to be focusing on in this next meeting in 3 activities is we will have people spend the first part of the time looking at the program organization and the massing, and then giving us their comments and their feedback on where we stand with that thus far. And then we're going to really drill down and look at the circulation, both car circulation, bike circulation, pedestrian circulation, entries and egresses, and have people comment on that as well. We have also engaged our traffic consultant and parking consultant who is working with us. So we've had, I think, a couple of meetings with them. We'll have one with them. 1,800 bike stalls. Right. We have 1,800. We have 800 for the community center and 1,000 for the future school use. And so, again, we'll go through a presentation and explain those different aspects up close, and then we'll have people at tables give us their comments and concerns about the circulation and parking. And then the last part of the activity, we're going to start to talk about architectural style and preferences. So we've looked around Palo Alto and the surrounding area and really gotten a sense of what we see as most prominent in terms of architectural style. So mid-century modern, arts and crafts, mission, and contemporary and high-tech. And we have examples of existing buildings that are familiar to people. And we will ask them to tell us what they like, rank them individually, tell us the features that they like about these different architectural elements, and then rank them overall. And then we'll do the same thing for landscape style preferences. So we'll be looking at shapes and forms and landscape and hardscape and paving and color palette. And again, get people's comments on the look and feel for that. And then to really speak to a little bit to the previous presentation, this is something that's a big concern of ours, is to really consider the sustainability, the environmental impact on the site, and to bring the best knowledge and certainly collaboration amongst all city departments in this project to be sure that it can be a stellar example for bringing some of these new ideas across the entire campus. So, as I said, we have engaged our parking and traffic consultant, energy and sustainability consultants. We've put some word out. They are still to be determined. The environmental impact will be the city's CEQA consultant, and then we also are soliciting proposals from cost estimating and phasing consultants as well. And so, and after the feedback from this meeting, then we will come back with basically 3 to 6 alternates that consider all of these different aspects. So they'll consider, again, the look and feel, they'll consider the biking, parking, and circulation, and also, very importantly, the phasing, which is something we've begun to look at internally and with the staff. But once we get this last round of information, we'll have much more information about how to best phase that with the least amount of interruption as possible. So our next meeting is Thursday night, and then we have a big chunk of work between that meeting in May, and we are working on a schedule with Kristen to look at all of the different boards and commissions that need to be updated and have their input, and we'll be doing that over the next 4 months as we bring in the consultants as well. And then, of course, I think on the 11th, we're meeting with the commission and the council, and then on the 12th, we're meeting with the school board to bring them up to speed.
Thank you, Bobby. I did want to add just a couple of comments. The first is that while this looks like we already have a design, I just want to be clear that it's not a design. It's a starting point based on a compilation of everything that we've heard, based on the shared village concept. That was a preference from the community, and so this is a starting point of getting feedback from the community, from the city council, from the school board, from the Parks and Rec Commission, and also we'll be going to the Planning and Transportation Commission, hopefully in February as well. So, like I said, it looks like it's a design, but it's not it's very conceptual, and it's just taking all the pieces, putting them down on paper to see how it flows, to see how the adjacencies work together, to look at the circulation and traffic. So just wanted to be clear on that. And as Bobby said, we are doing a city council study session February 11th, and then the school board will be doing the same study session the next night. Thank you.
Thanks, Kristen, and thanks, Bobby. I thought that was really good. If you've been in any of the sessions, then you understand the design, because when you end up with those big sheets laid out, and there's 3 of them, and you understand what that is. It's a accumulation of what the thoughts are, and I want to compliment you right now on the process. I think has been particularly good in terms of involvement. I'm going to start differently. I'm going to start from the inside out. Commissioner
Because you
Cripps,
saw I have all these questions.
I
right?
didn't, actually. I thought I'd start with,
Thank you.
please.
Could you tell us again how many people attended both sessions?
Oh, yes. I do have that on. I don't know if I have it on this side. I think we had around 257 in the first meeting, and around 150 some odd in the second meeting.
And do you know how many of the people who came to the second were also at the first? Are they repeaters or new people?
I want to say we did have quite a few new people at the second meeting, and I don't know if I have those numbers exactly for you, but I want to say half of the people were new in the second meeting.
So, you've done this for a long time with a lot of different communities. We're a community of, are we 60,000 people now? About 65 now? 66? Okay, so we're growing. Is it troubling that we have 257 people?
Not at all.
Okay.
I mean, to be perfectly honest, I think if you have above 100 people who consistently come, and if you're also drawing new people to the table, I mean, over all the years that we've done this, we've found that we have the most creative input, and really over the time, when we get to the end of the project, we also have the greatest, I think, acceptance of the plan.
Okay, well, that's encouraging. Yeah. So the next question is there a way or is there a time that the staff comments and observations about this plan at different times in the planning process get somehow weighted or get thrown into the mix, Kristen? Are we, because you all know when people come and say, we don't have this, or we'd like to have this, or this doesn't work, or this works and I really love this, or I wish I had this. I mean, I feel like the staff has a real sense of those things.
Yeah, so staff's been providing input all along. As a matter of fact, I shared this presentation with Darren and Peter Jensen earlier today to get their feedback, just as experienced park planners and knowing the community and how things are laid out in the city. And then we're also meeting with our transportation department, with Public Works, with planning, sustainability, to get everyone's feedback along the way. So staff is definitely weighing in on, it's more of a, is that realistic? Will this work? Will this adjacency work or layout? So yes, it is happening.
Okay, so that's good.
And if I
too.
could just add just one more thing that I want to reiterate, and that is that, while we think about the specifics of the programs and those kinds of things, and I think we know enough from what we're learning from community members in these meetings, we also know how to take that information and create the most flexible space that can be a lot of different things. So I think what's really important is knowing what kind of square footage you need, knowing what kind of adjacencies are going to make sense over time, that will also allow you to share certain things, share anything from, infrastructure to, outdoor space to any number of things. So I think, again, when you have, over 100 people that are doing this and they'll have 2 more opportunities, I think you're pretty safe.
Okay, just a few more questions, please, Chair. What's the size of the pool?
To be specific.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't, I would have to ask Connor or Stephen. I don't know the answer to that. I think it is big enough to be a lap pool. I want to say that it's.
Well, it shows two. One is a lap pool, but I don't think it's, whether it's 25 or 50 meters. I'm not sure.
assuming from looking at the pictures that it's not 50.
Yeah.
That it's hopefully 25, but can't tell how many lanes it is.
And it's not really it's not that detailed, this
We haven't
design
gotten to that point yet.
We're not quite there yet.
Okay.
And then the other one is more of a recreational pool. So there were 2 pools shown.
Okay. And are you yet convinced that the 2 gyms are enough, or should there be a push to do a bigger gym to make sure that we can accommodate? Gym space seems to be the thing that's really, really, really necessary in all communities now that girls are playing sports as much as boys are. And I just wondered if you felt like there was enough space for gyms based on usage.
I don't know if I know the answer to that. I think it's certainly an important consideration.
Yeah.
I think the balance is understanding, I guess the not so clear picture of what the future would be for the school, and if there is a school there and what that might be. So I think that's one thing that would factor into that, is all I'm saying.
Oh.
But, and if I'm not mistaken, I think that the one gym is bigger than the other. Yeah, considerably bigger than the other. But we'll certainly take that back to the team. I mean.
Okay, I think
Could
I'd
very
be
well
really
be,
interested
yes,
in
absolutely.
knowing that.
Sure.
And then at some point along the way, it seems like you're going to be able to put a price tag and a
Yes.
phasing
Yes.
on this,
Yes.
so that everybody has that understanding of this beautiful
Absolutely.
picture that you've done with all the phasing and the green space and everything. And then my last question, I'm sure that you can't have an answer to this, because it's really more just about the city's space, and a kind of option B, since the school district has an obligation to provide for the future and a possible future school. At some point along the way, will the staff just consider what they might do with 8 acres of city land?
We haven't discussed that. I mean, we're committed to doing a master plan.
I mean,
It's in the lease agreement,
Yeah.
and there was the Cubberley Compact that was signed a couple of years ago. So we're not at a point where we would.
And I understand that, and I understand that both the school district and the city are paying for the study, and, we hope to have a big community effort out of this, but the fact remains that we've been doing this for a really long time, and we still have Cubberley the way it was 30 years ago. And so it seems like with all of these beautiful pictures and this thoughtfulness that perhaps there should be some thinking privately or publicly about Plan B. What if the school district just needs to go forward and protect their space for a potential school? What would the city then do?
I mean, it would be a very different, obviously, design because, like you said, gym space is, we need more gym space. The city doesn't have any.
No.
It's all on
Right.
school district
Yes.
property.
Now, in this plan, and let me see if I can't pull it up. The blue, the way we've done this in consideration of what you're talking about is to really put the programs that we know are city-specific on this, within the city's footprint. So the blue is the city. The purple would be shared. So let's just play it out. If everything were there, then, it would, there's still no reason why you can't have the school and you can't have the shared space. Now, maybe the city doesn't get as much of that shared space as much of the time as they typically do. But, after hours and everything else, I mean, we did this in Emeryville, I think, and it's really a matter of, there's going to have to be a land use conversation. There's going to have to be, how do you own and operate this together and separately, and what do you own together, or what do you do, and scheduling. But it can be done. I mean, it's being done on 8 acres in Emeryville, in some ways much more challenging and constraints.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Commissioner Lemare?
I appreciate all your work on this. Do we have any idea of the demographics of the people who are attending the meetings?
I think we do. I know we have been collecting at least zip codes. I don't have that analysis for you, but we can certainly
But
get
do
that
we,
for you.
I guess I'm also asking as far as age of participants. I attended the first meeting, but I wasn't able to get to the second one. But, I think being able to make sure that who we're gathering input from is extremely important. And I didn't know if we had an idea of age ranges or anything like that.
Well, we can come back with some more detailed information on that. We did have, I wasn't able to make it, but we did have a session at Gunn High School today. We were trying to do one at Palo as well. The kids are so busy. But we did want to have an extra time to reach out to them. I mean, these are young kids who will be the ones that will use this space, much more than,
Right.
you all sitting here. And so we did want to get some input from them.
Well, and I think sometimes too, people who have maybe more time right now, maybe if they're retired or just they're able to attend more meetings, and maybe they end up with a bigger voice than other people who aren't able to participate in the process. I think to keep that in mind. I really think flexibility, as you have underscored, is extremely important. We don't know the future of where we're going, and we don't know. I mean, who knows? Maybe, and when you're speaking with the younger kids, I think it's extremely important. Who knows? Maybe we need a small venue that can become an esports venue, for example. I mean, no one's really thinking about esports, we weren't thinking about that a few years ago, but all of a sudden that's becoming very popular. There's college campuses that are sponsoring it. It's actually becoming something. But I think there's a lot of things out there that we don't even know about. And I think to really keep that in mind.
Absolutely.
I think this question would be for Kristen, but do city staff, are they able to get out and tour other facilities similar to what we're trying to do, just so that we have other ideas as well, or we could see something and say, wow, this would be really something that we would want for the city? I think sometimes having a menu or being able to travel places and see things is important as well.
So we did tour the Emeryville Center for Community Life with the school district, and some city staff went and did that together. We haven't physically gone to other similar projects, but we've done, a lot of online research
Yeah,
to
I just
see
think
what is
sometimes-
out there.
Sometimes without seeing something, and you don't know about it.
You don't know what you don't
You
know.
don't, exactly, you don't know what
Yeah.
you don't know. And, you know, I also, that's one thing I like with the menus that you showed in terms of architectural styles or landscaping styles, where you're giving people something to look at and choose from, as opposed to them trying to generate their ideas when they're not experts. And I think also to keep in mind, when we did look at what type of programming is important, what are we not thinking of based on generations to come that will be using this, and with changes. But again, just, I really appreciate all the time put into this and what's being generated and just the ideas that can come from it. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Commissioner Colley?
So this is really cool stuff. I envy you that you get to spend
It's
your day
super fun.
all
It
day
really
with this
is.
sort of thing. Number one, I'll piggyback on Jeff's comment about definitely trying to reach out to, you know, a wide variety of groups to receive feedback, and I'm sure that's part of the plan, but to go beyond those who are able to attend meetings and actually try to hopefully obtain feedback and also buy in to the broader vision. So this is amazing. It seems as though, my primary concern is that it seems as though it will be incredibly expensive. And this kind of actually comes back to Ann's point, which is that we've been talking for, I think, a very long while, certainly longer than I've lived in Palo Alto, about what to do with Coverly. And it's been a big conundrum. And this is a huge step forward. But from my perspective, if there's something that is, you know, $1 billion or more sort of campus, it's going to be incredibly difficult to ever build the momentum to get something like that done. And this looks like an amazing vision. But how do you get from this vision with a price tag that's probably really large at the moment and only going up? How do you get there? And in view of the different constituencies in play between the school district and the city of Palo Alto and the recognition of limited resources. Now, and that's a huge question, and I don't expect you to be able to tackle it, but I am kind of curious for you to allay the fear a little bit, and also maybe talk about the phasing to the extent you can of how you would actually think about doing this in phases. Again, without any, you know, commitment that it would be where things actually go, but give some perspective on how you might do this in phases in a way that would be digestible.
Excuse me. Well, part of what we will do in this analysis going forward, especially when it looks at the phasing, is to consider, I mean, all of this is you have to consider so many things at once, right? So in looking at the phasing, considering, well, what does the phasing look like? How long will that take? Then what is the increase in cost the longer that you wait? So trying to find a balance. So that will be all part of our cost estimating analysis. We'll bring that analysis back to you to consider that. And, you know, again, when it comes to these kinds of projects in the design, to me, it's a balance of you want to be as creative as you possibly can and have the biggest vision that you possibly can in order to get people excited and want to do it at the same time with not, you know, a blank checkbook. So it's really a balance of trying to find a way to put those two things together and and I think that you can create these spaces in a way that can be super exciting. I think there's a lot that can happen outside. But I think it can still be, you know, we've done a lot of schools, and schools don't have unlimited budgets, certainly in most of the places that we work. So you have to find ways to be really creative without having it be cost prohibitive. So I don't know what to say except that you really have to blend being very visionary and very creative at the same time, understanding that there are constraints, cost constraints. I think that something like this is also, there's an opportunity to, especially with the city and the school district collaboration and how that moves forward and how you develop certain agreements and things like that, that's an opportunity to attract additional resources to the table, because that's not done in a lot of places, and it's not necessarily easily done. But that's something that outside funders would find very attractive, I think. So I think you have to look at all of those things.
Absolutely. And that's, I think, as good a response as you probably could provide to my very, broad question. So maybe this would be a little bit of a way to target the question more. Could you provide a couple of examples of how you would possibly phase this so that it would be kind of digestible?
We actually have a phasing plan that we've sort of kept under wraps right now until we get this next round. But
and I'm not. I don't mean to.
No, I mean I
push you to disclose things you're not ready to disclose.
Sure.
But I'm just wondering, like, would a phase be where you do the blue buildings, for example, and then you move to the next ones? I'm just curious.
There are two things to consider in the phasing. One is, how do you maintain the programs at Coverly, and to not have as little disruption with that as possible. So that's one thing to consider in the phasing. And then the other is, I think what's operating right now is what the community wants to be sure to see. I think the phasing from the school district is something they don't have enough clear answers or directions yet. So it would make sense that the blue buildings would likely be first. But again, we could share that with you. I mean, we actually, I don't have it right now, but we do have at least a notion of what we think that might look like. So whenever the next appropriate time is to share that, we can certainly do that.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. It's something that we're thinking about from the beginning. Let's just say it's so complicated that you have to consider it from the beginning.
Absolutely,
So,
yeah.
Well, and there are opportunities, for example, the pavilion, the gyms, the theater are already situated opposite of where the blue buildings are.
Right.
So you wouldn't, ideally you would never, like Bobby was saying, you would never lose use of a particular building as something else was being built. So I think that just the point being that phasing would be very specific as to, okay, when this is being built, everything would go here, or
Right.
So we wouldn't lose use and function of the facility.
Anything else?
Nope, I'm going to let someone else
Commissioner
jump in.
Greenfield?
Well, thank you for walking our community through this thoughtful process. It's a challenging project and a challenging community and a challenging dynamic. But the ability to take the feedback and listen and respond, for example, adding the Greendale and 525 San Antonio sites to the project, that's great, and that really goes a long way to engendering trust within the community, because it's a skeptical community.
Yeah.
Particularly in a project that's been moving along as it has, the history. I'm looking forward to hearing more about the circulation plan and from the transportation consultant. That's great that someone's been engaged for that. I think the increases in overall usable space while also increasing the green space are big wins that the community would support. That obviously you can accomplish that by growing up, by going up, and that's a great mechanism to be able to employ. Following up on Ann's comments, a little bit, the pool location and the dog park, my sense is they're kind of filling space that isn't otherwise used, and I'm concerned that they're noisy features that are in close proximity to residences. So that seems like something to consider.
Excuse me, and I suspect we'll get those comments from people on Thursday.
On the gym space, do you have a number of the?
Excuse me.
Sure.
want some water?
Yes.
There's a
Thank
drinking
you.
fountain. Do you want to grab a drink?
Go ahead.
I don't mind.
I won't use it. I
I'm
get
sorry.
like that. That's why I have it.
Okay, I'm sorry. Tell me again.
I'm curious if we know the square footage of current gym space versus the plan for the new gym space, or what is the?
We do
the
know that.
increase?
We do know that. I can't tell you the answer right now, but we definitely know that. I mean, we have our original analysis is detailed on existing square footage and then what the addition is, so we can certainly share that with you.
Thank you. Is the white square building, is that a parking structure?
Yes.
Okay, good. And so is that a four-story parking structure?
That is I think it's a three-story parking structure. We made it 3 stories by bumping it out when the Greendale site was there.
So
Otherwise, excuse me, otherwise it would have had to be taller. And we have parking under the tennis courts that's not fully underground, so that it doesn't require the air circulation, but yes.
Thank you. I just want to encourage all of the commission members to try and make it out to the meeting Thursday if they can, particularly if you haven't been to one. It's a unique approach, and the city's seen a number of different approaches, and everyone attending kind of has an equal voice in a small table setting, and it seems to be working well. The last question or comment I'll put out is to understand how the Parks and Rec Commission can help in the current, not only in the current co-design process, but moving forward beyond the co-design process into the implementation phase, and to understand what role and what assistance we can provide. We have a ad hoc dedicated to assisting with the Coverly design process, and considering how this ad hoc can be used more effectively or efficiently to help along.
Well, I would say one of the big things that the commission could do is just be advocates for the project, not saying you have to agree with everything, but to really get the word out that we're going through this process, that we have these community meetings where we want people to come and sit at the table and do the activities. And if, you hear that people's reluctance, well, I'm going to another community meeting and, it's the same old story, then, just sort of dispel those beliefs that this is a different process. It's unique. It's really intended to be a co-design process. And then, of course, share your feedback as much as you can. And also, if you're hearing anything else from the community on concerns people have, we would like to hear that as well. So I think it's, because it is a co-design with the whole community, we're not meeting necessarily with individual groups. We don't have a stakeholder advisory group. I mean, it's anyone and everyone can come and share. So we're hoping the commission does that, but also that you spread the word and help us get people involved. There is an avenue for people to provide input online if they are unable to attend a meeting. So I think that's important information to have as well. If you're hearing frustration that people can't attend or the times don't work, that there is an opportunity for people to weigh in regardless.
That's great.
Where do those comments go?
We review the site regularly. We're in constant, review of it, and so we get emails, and we stay on top of that. It's very important to stay on top of that and comment to people directly.
That's great. And just one final comment I'll add, it really in response to concerns that Ryan and Jeff have voiced in terms of demographics. It's great to see the fellows include a number of high school students from Gunn and Palo, and that you are doing some outreach to the younger age groups. The attendance is limited in that age group, not surprisingly, but it's great to get some voice.
Yes, thank you. I would just add to your question before that, the fact that the school district and the city has taken this on very publicly, and I think, we, as Kristen mentioned, we're meeting with different staff departments and commissions, and we will continue to do that. In fact, we have a meeting to plan out exactly which commissions and councils we need to meet with and when in this next 4-month period. And, a lot can be said for a very public, collaborative support.
Transparent.
And transparency with commissions and councils speaking up and saying, we're informed, we're doing this together, we're listening, we're all in this, we're contributing our piece to it. That makes a big difference.
I guess there could be a place for a letter from the commission to council at the appropriate point when there's a final plan up for approval. And that should be something we ought to consider.
And I would suggest you also write one to the school board.
Oh, yeah, they want to hear from us. Again.
Well,
Again.
right. I remember that. I was at the last meeting.
It's an insight comment.
Yes. This could be a friendly letter, yes.
I think that's a great suggestion.
I think it's really positive, yes.
Mhm.
And it would be great for the school board to see both sides of the commission.
Both sides of us.
Yeah.
Commissioner Moss?
Thank you very much for all this work so far. This is a huge amount of work. And talking about demographics, I'll be perfectly honest, I've been sending out notes to the Green Dell community and the Green Meadow community, which are my communities, and encouraging them to come. And I hope that there's a number of 94306s in that population.
There are, yes.
And they do represent a significant part of the variety of demographics, school kids and older people. But I haven't reached out to the Ventura community, which has a tremendous number of apartment buildings, and I haven't reached out to North Palo Alto. And so I don't know. And also the existing programs, I'm assuming that you have representatives from the
Yes.
various people who are there today, and that they poll their clients or customers or whatever, because I'm not doing that.
Oh, they are doing that. In fact,
Okay.
one of the first meetings we had before we had our first public meeting was with the tenants, the Cubberley tenants. And, they've attended the meetings. They've been very vocal about their programs, and as they should.
And I am not surprised by the rankings of and the sheer number of items that you have on there. I think you've done an outstanding job of identifying the stakeholders. There must be 40 different or 50 different stakeholder groups that are using it in some way, shape, or form. And I'm not seeing many missing ones in that huge list. But is the priority correct? I don't know. And is the priority going to change? I don't know. So just having them on the list and having a representative is really half the battle, I think. I want to talk about this picture for a minute.
Okay.
I echo Commissioner Greenfield's concern about the pools being so close to the houses there. And I wanted to suggest that maybe some of those tennis courts and some of those pickleball courts could be on the roof of some of these buildings.
They are actually raised structure. They could be on some of the buildings as well, but,
So if we could move the pool in closer and put something between the pool and the houses, that might be better. And that might be better. I don't know how you can do it, but that would be my suggestion. And on the opposite end, the C, the purple building that looks like a C that's on the Greendale site is very close to the houses behind. And I would wonder if you could make it an I instead of a C, a capital I instead of a capital C, so it looks more like a girder, so that there is a less of a footprint
Right.
close to the houses. You'd have the same square footage in the purple building, but it would look more like an I instead of a C.
I see what you're saying.
That way you have more of a buffer against those houses.
Now, it's actually, what exists right now is actually just the flip of that. So, and what we did was, and this is sort of part of the phasing, how do you keep something there? And, which is a greatly needed space, so in order to build something new, you have to build something new, then tear down the old. So, just so you know, that what Greendale looks like right now is just the opposite of that. But
yeah.
it is a C.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
So you
in the
built
other
that so
direction.
that you could keep the old building there as long as possible, and the old programs untouched while you're building the new building. Okay.
So, but the point is that what's there now is not different than, it's only just
Oh,
the
yes,
reverse
it
image
is.
of it.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
in terms of there being,
No. It's much,
the next one?
it's
this one?
much closer to the housing. You can see where, see the green space, where the Greendale is? That huge green space? Yeah,
Yeah, right there.
exactly. That
That's
huge,
Greendale right there.
right. So you filled that huge green space with a purple C that is right up against those houses. So I was just thinking that maybe if there were some green space remaining
Between the houses and the
between-
thing. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
So I don't know if you can change this picture before Thursday, or if you can just make a
Well,
note of it and,
We'll make a note of it, certainly, and, and again, these are the kind of comments that we'll get from everybody, and we'll take all of that into consideration, for sure.
and then going back to what Commissioner Macaulay was saying about phasing, there's no question that this is a much bigger project because you added the 525 and the Greendale site. I had brought that up at the very beginning, that you should include it only because of access, only because people need access to the Greendale. I didn't realize they were going to go do this incredible addition. But I'm hoping that the phasing will, first of all, the school district has to be acutely aware of what their needs are, and I have no idea that they would need a school in the same time frame that you do some of the other stuff. So I would suspect that a new middle school or a new high school would be the very last thing they would do. They'd probably do
They'd probably do their offices
their
before
offices
they would do that,
first.
yes. And they would probably do Greendale, because there's need there, and if they
Right.
could move the adult school,
Right.
yeah.
And so I think that the phasing will sort of it'll sort of happen through osmosis. It'll happen because there are certain things that are higher priority to the school district and to us. But even with all that prioritization, I think it's going to still be a huge cost, and it'll be interesting to see what we can do to get that. And over on the far right, the housing, I think that there is far less pressure on height limit and size pointing out towards San
Towards San
Antonio.
Antonio, mhm.
So if you made that a 4-story building, nobody would complain. if you made the back ones 4 stories that are butt up against housing, that may be an issue. Although really it's just for 3 houses on that side. The other side are apartment buildings all facing into each other. There's nobody looking out that direction. Nobody's looking out that direction the way the apartment buildings are set. So anyway, that you have more flexibility with that.
Absolutely.
And then I think you've answered all my questions.
Great.
All right,
Okay.
thank you.
Well, thank you for the input. We will remember that. And like I said, as we've done this and we've had conversations with the staff and everything, we kind of anticipate some of those same questions and
Yeah,
concerns.
anything you can put on roofs would be greatly appreciated.
Yes,
Because then you have more room.
absolutely.
So, do I dare ask if anybody has any burning issues that would, based on the conversation we've had? If not, I'd like to sort of close by, number 1, thanking you again.
Oh, thank you.
Number 2, hoping that you get well enough that you're actually there on Thursday.
Oh, I'll be there on Thursday.
In terms of people asking about the participation, having been to these meetings, I think your success in getting participation is really good. I mean, considering we've done outreach and the only people who showed up got there by accident, I think the fact that you had 250 and then you might say, gee, why less in the second one? But I hope you have really good attendance at the Thursday meeting, and I want to thank Commissioner Moss for his outreach on that. On your final slide, it talked about what the whole plan was. It said the basis, and it had that list of items on basis. I don't think there's any question that you've taken some GSI things into account.
Yes.
But it would be really interesting on your list of things that there, where it's parking and traffic, energy and sustainability. I know that GSI sort of applies to all of those, but it might be interesting just to have another bullet on there that just says the GSI.
Absolutely.
Because you've got a great opportunity with all of the space and the rooftops and everything else to do that. I do think that the concern in terms of outreach, that sometimes in Palo Alto, we're at risk of the vocal minority being the ones that dictate what happens. I do think that the list of different projects and programs and whatnot that you have says that you've at least touched the majority of ones that are available. And I do know that you had reached out to the existing tenants. So when you were saying we're not talking to groups, I was going to correct you and say I believe you are talking to at least the tenants, which is a legitimate interest group, and I appreciate that. Other than that, I think everybody's made the right comments, and I look
Great.
forward to seeing you on Thursday.
Thank you so
And
much.
I hope the
Thank
rest
you
of
very
us come and bring our friends.
Yes, please do. It should be fun.
That would be my comment is, in terms of your answer to Commissioner McCauley about who's having all the fun. I mean, let's not let her have all the fun. Let's go have some fun with her. And she brings blocks and everything else to play with.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Kristen, do you want to make any comments to wrap that up, or I think it was great?
Sure, it's been an interesting process. I've been really pleased with how it's going. Sometimes it's a whirlwind where I think, oh my gosh, this is happening so quickly. But as I think Bobby shared in their first presentation, they did the Katrina recovery plan in like 9 months. So if they can do that in 9 months, we can do this. So it's, yeah.
you won't age me as much as that.
Yeah, I was gonna make that comment, that the fact that you promised us a plan by the end of the year is just mind-boggling, and it's working. It's moving. So because a lot of people as Ann said, have been working on this or talking about this for decades. So, anyway.
Well, you know, the efficiency is, believe it or not, is having everybody in the room doing it instead of a lot of subcommittees and, you know, yeah. Just, we've learned that over the years, so. All right, thank you so much. I'll see you tomorrow. Okay, I'll come in. Okay.
Take care, get well.
All right, thank you.
I'm a little afraid to touch the button. I already went and got some afterwards. Yeah. Here we go. I have to get on a plane later this week, so I don't want to get sick either.
The next item on the agenda, I get maybe the privilege of introducing Monique to speak about the Aspen Technology work that went on. It was a dialogue. It was about libraries and community services, and I think the outcome was very good, and I appreciate Monique being here to talk about it.
Thank you. I'm Monique Ziesenhenny, Director of Library and Community Services. At the time that I was appointed to this role, Jim Keene tasked me with looking for ways that community services and libraries could perhaps work more efficiently together, could perhaps collaborate on more of our work without returning to the time when libraries were part of community services. So keeping two separate departments, but thinking about what were some of the strategies and the needs around having the staff work more closely together. And as it turned out, about a week later, the state library had this grant possibility from the Aspen Institute, which we applied for. We were one of 3 libraries in the state to receive it. And before I applied, I had talked to the state librarian and Amy Garmer at Aspen and said, I don't want it just to be the library. Here's what's going on in Palo Alto. Can this work? And it was a new experiment for them as well. So the way the Aspen dialogues work, you're awarded the grant and then they go away and do their own research on what's going on in your community, you know, what might be happening with libraries, with community wellness, with health, with other issues. And then they get the leadership from both library and community services together to make recommendations on who might be an advisory group, sort of an advisory council for a half-day meeting to help distill what those topics might be, what they might want to really think about both before the actual dialogue day and you know, into the future. So Dawn was nice enough to represent the PRC along with many other community members. We had probably a group of about 20 people to give us that, to give Aspen and the staff that feedback. And then from there, we looked at other community leaders who might contribute to the dialogue, and Aspen made some recommendations based on what they had learned. You know, could we have perhaps more health representation or more representation for older adults, things like that, to create some balance, education, you know, college representation. So, and then it's a full day of a couple of speakers introducing concepts and ideas, and then groups, and then the group talking about it all together, breaking into groups to discuss certain particular topics, and then making recommendations going forward. So I hope you all read the report. You've had it. It's also been distributed to the Library Commission and the City Council. And I think that it was an interesting day and productive from the standpoint that I think it was hard for some of the participants to think about community services in the same way that they thought about libraries. Maybe they had a better idea of what libraries were, because not all the people were internal necessarily to the city, or even though they were either working in the city or living in the city, maybe not as involved with CSD as they might be with the library. And so I think that that had some effect on the outcome as well. I did want to point out, we did invite people from the school district. That was one of the comments the Library Commission made. They said, I noticed no one was representing PAUSD, and no one was available for that. It was during the transition of Don Austin beginning, and so I just wanted to put that out there, that we did invite them to participate. But I think that for the Library Commission, one of the things that probably Commissioner McDougall will be happy about is the idea of platform, right? So people, place, and platform as the assets that could be leveraged. And I would argue that it's not only libraries, but it's also the strength for CSD in the time that I've been involved with this department and thinking about what are the things that we do together. They certainly both have that element to them. So, human capital being critical, the actual infrastructure that we have available. Palo Alto, in my opinion, is quite amazing in terms of the libraries and the parks and the recreational resources. It's unlike most places that I've ever worked, and certainly very few that I've ever visited. And then again, that idea of the civil society institutions being a platform for community improvement, community wellness, and learning and leisure hand in hand. So I hope that you have some questions for me, and I'm here to answer them.
Commissioner Moss?
This is timely that this discussion is right after the Coverly Master Plan, because reading the report, it never occurred to me how much of a community center each library is, and all the libraries together are essentially an extension of the Coverly Community Center, or the Coverly Community Center is an extension of the libraries. But when I went to Mitchell Park Library recently, that you have at least 2 rooms in the library that are used for multi-purpose. Mm-hmm. It's not just a place to go get a book, mm-hmm. and it's not just a place to get internet access, but you do have these rooms, and I'm not even talking about the community rooms outside of the library, but inside the library. And so the fact that you have identified how many different stakeholder groups and use the library, it's not just people who are checking out books.
Correct.
And that was very beneficial in that report. And if there's any way that at the entrance of every library you could show all the things that are happening in the library that have nothing to do with checking out books, I think it would be extremely valuable extension of this study. And it goes back to platform. You got the place, you got the people, but what are all the things that you can do there that people aren't really aware of?
Yeah. It's a great comment, and I think it's true of both departments, actually, that there is a lot going on that if you're, most people have their path, their thing that they use the city for, their parks, hiking, or they're in aquatics, or they come to the library and they have their route where they go pick up their things. When somebody comes to volunteer at the library, we give them a tour and they say, I had no idea you had this. And usually the volunteers are kind of the super users. So you're absolutely right. So there's a couple of things that we're thinking about, using CSD's facilities rentals to highlight what rooms are available and make reservations for library rooms. In the past, we have offered programs that were sort of a teaser for the CSD program, so that we would bring the yoga instructor to the library, do the one-off freebie, but have somebody there to sign them up for the class. Not that there's ever space in anybody's classes because they're all so popular, but at the same time, just to create an awareness of those kinds of things. And then looking, at who else we can partner with sort of as a third party for both departments to either help offer paid classes or free or whatever to create greater awareness.
Yeah, with that, you have the Enjoy catalog, which shows classes, courses, adult ed, events, and if you had events that were in the library, and just like you said, they're teasers for the rest of the programs in the Enjoy catalog, that then you could use them both together.
Yep, thanks.
Anybody else have any comments or questions? The challenge, and I think, Monique, you and I have talked about this before, is that when you talk about the library, the history is that it's the library structure. It's the building in which it's the warehouse. And people are learning that it's not just the structure, it's all the services that go with it, the programs that are really part of it. When you talk about CSD, I think you think about the services,
Right.
and you don't think about the infrastructure. And so, what you and I have talked about is the idea that both the library is a platform on which you put stuff, and the CSD is a platform on what you put stuff. And the opportunity for Palo Alto is to add one and one and make an even bigger platform out of the whole thing. And I think that really is the ambition. It has to be, one big platform that has all these services, and that doesn't mean they have to be one organization or whatever. But do you think we're moving in that direction successfully, or at least thinking about it? Or because I know 5 years ago I said in order to get on the library commission, I said I didn't think the libraries were anything about books. They were about bicycle repair stations and whatever, if you remember that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's why we have the walk and roll bike maps, right, to the libraries. So one of the things that we've done as the manager groups, the two sets of managers, is meet together and talk about who are our community partners, who do we share in common. I may have mentioned this to you, but we basically mapped who we are all partnering with, whether you were in the theater or art center or recreation or library. And we went through and had the different names, whether it was Avenidas or YMCA or whatever, and a different color coding for each division. And some had 8 circles around them because different divisions were all partnering with the YMCA, but none of us knew the others were doing it. And so it was really interesting to us to see how many community partners there are out there that we're already working with, and thinking about that platform, how can we leverage that better? So we are working towards hopefully a fuller report of these are who we're working with right now, and also thinking about how can we, given that there's challenges, we never have enough staff, we never have enough money, so how can we work with them most effectively and really, leverage everyone to do a little bit more, or a lot more.
Yeah, I think if we could figure out how to have an integrated platform, and then the library has things on it, and CSD has things on it, and then X, Y, and Z, the partners, and I think you're doing the right thing by exploring the partnerships. I know you and I have talked about that before, as partnerships. Commissioner Greenfield?
Thank you. And thank you for sharing this dialogue. It is interesting to try to pursue the collaborations between library and CSD, and as you just mentioned, the staff limitations and the workload is a big challenge. I look at this as trying to establish synergies between the groups, between library and CSD, and a couple of things come to mind. One is the Enjoy catalog, which was mentioned, but that seems like an opportunity to advertise resources of the libraries more broadly to the group that's looking more directly at at recreation, and it could be used to have some full page ads, sort of as David was suggesting, to list the resources that are in the library and list some of the recreation resources and community services resources that might not be explicitly listed as classes in the Enjoy catalog. So something to consider. Something else that came to mind is library technology was emphasized, and understanding how the technology acumen could be used within community services. A couple of things specifically are the Foothills Park Interpretive Center is in great need of a facelift, and perhaps some of the library staff could be used in a cross-pollination to come up with some ideas on how to implement something a little more 21st century.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, that's a great idea.
And maybe there's something, I know the junior museum plans are well underway, but there may be some sort of a branching that could be useful there as well.
Yeah, good ideas.
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ross?
Commissioner Greenfield just
Sparked an idea.
mentioned, as far as partners, talking about the Foothills Community Center, there's also the Palo Alto Historical Society, and they really don't have a home. They have a home in the Cubberley, but they really should be a part of the library in some way, or at least.
They are.
Well, I don't know where.
Okay.
So anyway, if there was some way to enhance their presence.
Sure. I can give you a little bit of the history of that. Of course, they were co-located in the main library before main library was renovated and became Rinconada. The Palo Alto Historical Association maintains the Guy Miller archives, which actually are city-owned archives. And so when we had to move out of main library, I found them space at Cubberley, which was great. So we got real estate to give them a room at a very reasonable rate. And the intention is actually for those documents, which are many of them historical in nature and need to be stored, in an appropriate temperature and, with the right kind of light. The idea was that they would be in a room at the Roth Building when it was converted to a museum. So they will be near City Hall, more accessible to library and other things. But they are still the key resource digitally for a lot of the local information. And we work with them to digitize photographs and documents and resources and make them available. So they are available through the library catalog and their own catalog. And we continue to work with them on that project because there's a lot of information available. And part of the library impact fee, in fact, is earmarked because this collection did reside in the library at one time. moving it to the Roth Building can expand access and meets the criteria. So while it's not in a library building at the moment, it does get library support. And genealogists, actually, when they contact the library, we go to PAHA to look for obituaries and other databases. So there's a lot of actual interaction with the library staff, because we get a lot of those kind of calls, so, from all over the country, all over the world. All roads lead to Palo Alto, we've decided.
And that reminds me, relative to what Commissioner Moss said earlier about having something when you enter the library that says all the things are going on. There is a whiteboard in the main library where you walk in and it says, here's the cooking class, here's the Chinese language class, here's whatever. There's a whole list of,
Right.
Here's the yoga class that's going on or whatever.
Today, right, yeah, or this week at least.
Yeah.
And they have the electronic boards as well, but the whiteboards have worked out better, actually, that low-tech.
It jumps right at you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can see exactly what's
There's
going on.
a-
You don't have to stand there and wait for things to flip by. So, yeah.
So I don't see any other questions. I would encourage everybody, if they didn't really study the report, I think relative to the future of what CSD and the libraries can do together in Palo Alto, this whole idea of integrating platform and partnerships is really important, and I would encourage you to continue the dialogue. Maybe we should have a joint session with the Library Commission
Yeah.
to have some of these conversations as well.
That's a great idea, and I'll be happy to coordinate dates between, so that, the LAC meets less frequently than you all do, so, we'll pull you for some available dates. How about that?
And we'd like to invite them on a night when we have pickleball on the agenda or something like that.
But I would invite you, if you go back and you read or you take a look at this in the interest of community engagement, please feel free to send me any thoughts that come up, or if you think of something we can do. We do have library activities in Enjoy, but I think the idea of highlighting some of the collections and things like that, and maybe more than just the basic specific programming would be really an interesting tool. So thank you for the
Yeah, and although we're called Parks and Recreation, I really think that maybe we ought to be called Parks and Community Services, to reinforce the fact that when we put together agendas and questions and topics, we need to be supporting the community services part of what Kristen's team does. Monique, thank you.
You're
And
welcome.
thank you,
Thank
Monique,
you.
for attending all our meetings and
It's great.
persevering with us. Thank you. The next item is whether there have been any other ad hoc committee meetings or topics that anybody wants to talk about. Commissioner McCauley? Left? He snuck out on me. Commissioner Lemare? Commissioner Cribbs?
No.
Commissioner Greenfield?
Just one brief announcement that the mayor's planting hosted by Canopy at Cubberley will be at 5:15 on Thursday. I'm sorry, it's at Mitchell Park at 5:15. And
When is that?
this Thursday at 5:15 at Mitchell Park Community Center. And Canopy will be planting a mayor's tree for Mayor Filseth. So something that everyone's invited to attend before they head over to the Cubberley Co-Design meeting.
Exactly. Commissioner Moss?
I just wanted to make sure that the Renzel Pond effort is part of the Baylands Comprehensive Plan, and that we we'll have another opportunity to add more to it now that it's finished. So maybe another meeting of the comprehensive plan committee or subcommittee or steering group, we could have one of those, another one of those.
I'll pass that along to Darren.
Also, as far as open space, there was some discussion about bald eagles showing up at Arastradero Preserve, and conversations with the rangers confirmed that we do have some, and I was a little concerned that we might have traffic from birders, but they assure us that it's not a problem right now. But just to know that we have them in our city is pretty amazing. The other thing is the Magical Bridge playground is still drawing huge crowds. I've never seen it so crowded as this past yesterday, Monday. Right. And I did have an opportunity to meet with the co-founder of the Magical Bridge, and when we get to talking about a tentative agenda for next meeting, I'd like to bring up the possibility of having them come, because just like the libraries, I think that the Magical Bridge can be enhanced and expanded in our city. So that's all I had.
So let's move to the next topic of next agendas. I'll put down Magical Bridge as a potential topic. Are there any other burning issues? Commissioner Gribbs.
Pickleball.
I think pickleball has a standing reservation as a potential topic.
Yes.
Okay.
So just, it doesn't have to be a whole agenda item, but just a report about the outreach to the different groups and where we are with that and the construction that's coming up.
Right.
An update would be great. And the same thing with the restrooms in the parks and the community outreach that's being done to Darren's choices of parks. Can I add something for the agenda too? So
yes,
were we going to do a CIP, kind of 101 CIP update about what money's coming up? Is that
Put
sometime
CIP on the agenda, we should
coming?
have it at the next meeting.
On there?
It's been on the last 2 meetings, and it keeps getting bumped for other things, so we'll
Okay,
do
I
it
thought
in
you were saying
February.
it's been on and I totally missed it.
No,
I
no,
was gonna
no,
be really
we have it,
embarrassed.
and then it gets moved because something,
I would have gone with
else
that. I'm
comes
sorry.
up.
You weren't, you missed it?
I did miss it. And then the last one on my list is fund development, as we're talking about potential Cubberley funding on down the line. I think maybe we should have a discussion again about fund development.
Yes.
I don't know.
Or maybe that's a good retreat topic.
Yeah.
Right.
Probably
so.
much better. That would be
There
all.
there was mention of the urban forest master plan as well. Yeah.
and then I also you had requested, Commissioner Moss, an update on the Renzel wetland.
I put that down. I think if we looked at it as an update on the Bay Comprehensive Plan or
Yeah.
Bixby as well.
Yeah.
Because I think there's an open question of, there's still trucks up on top of Bixby, and I think we were told that that would all be done by the end of October. maybe they've just moved on to the next phase, which will be done by the end of next October or something. But I think we need an update on that.
And in addition, I'm not sure if this is an agenda item or for the retreat, but the 10.5 acres has been totally used for the San Francisco Creek project, which is now done. And when I rode by there today, it's empty of equipment for the first time in 9 years, and it's a flat mud field. And so I think that this year we should be addressing that 10.5 acres. Do you want to have that as a PRC retreat
We'll figure-
issue, or something to come?
Let's put all this stuff on the list, and then we'll, with
Okay.
Commissioner Greenfield and I and Kristen and Darren will figure out which of the ones
Okay.
that we.
Because
I think just making the list is a good idea like that.
I have about 8 items for the PRC retreat agenda. So do you want to deal with those now? Do you want me to list them now or list them in a minute? Are we talking about both agendas right now?
I think we're combining it and sorting out which it would be.
Okay.
Why don't you go ahead and
All
list
right.
them? I need to-
The North Ventura Comprehensive Plan, it says March 2020, but I think we have to start working on that this year. Is Fry's?
So it's already there, it's already underway, and Commissioner Rectal's the liaison to that group.
So can we have an update on that, either in the PRC retreat or as an agenda item? Because that's huge.
I think that could be addressed in the liaison
Right.
and ad hoc updates.
Okay, so if we could get one of those. And then also, we talked about the boardwalk, and when will we have an opening for the boardwalk?
We are looking at dates. We don't have the date yet, but
It
we'll
won't
let
be the 30th of this month. That's when you're done with the construction, right?
Darren's planning that, so I don't know what dates
Okay.
he's considering, but we'll let you
Okay.
know as soon as we have it.
All right. Another area that we should probably look at is, the question is, when can we deal with Buckeye Creek? It's a very expensive thing, and I think in the PRC retreat, do we spend any more time on it this calendar year, or do we have to shove it off to next year?
So I think we have a lot of priorities to weigh as a commission.
Exactly.
And I think we would do well to use our comprehensive plan as a guiding document to inform our actions and to prioritize our actions. And to that end, we need to take into consideration staff and financial resources that are available. And I think we need to sit down and look realistically at what we can hope to accomplish this year as part of the retreat.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe would it be easier for you to email a list of items to consider for the retreat to Kristen, and then she can share them.
I think so.
With Donna and me, rather than taking the time now.
Okay.
Not trying to cut you off, but.
No.
I think so. And just on the Buckeye Creek, there was an informational item that went to council that described our current plan with that. So I can send you that link if you want to look at it. But
Yeah,
I
I'd
don't
like to
think
know if
anything
there's-
will have changed since then.
Okay. Okay. That's all I have.
And so you're gonna email us a list. I appreciate that. I think that's beneficial. And I would invite any other commissioners to do exactly the same thing, particularly for the retreat. Give us any input, send it directly to Kristen for any thoughts you might have about what we should do effectively in the retreat. If that's it, I would ask for a motion for adjournment.
Before we do that, it probably leading up to the retreat, it'd be good for all commissioners to take a look at the existing ad hoc committees and liaison roles, both roles that you're participating in directly now or would like to participate further in, as we look to assign the ad hoc roles for the coming year. We need to consider the ad hoc committees. Does it make sense to keep the committees we have? Are there new committees we should be adding, such as the GSI committee, for example? Are there any committees that we can merge together to increase efficiency? So these are all questions to consider leading up to the meeting. Feel free to forward any direct input that you think would be useful for Kristen and Don and me to see before the meeting. Otherwise, we can dig into it at the retreat.
Thank you. And we can send out it's in the minutes from the retreat, but we can send that out so everyone has the liaison or ad hoc assignments.
And I thought, actually, if we send that out, maybe we could send it out in the format of questions to consider before you show up. Here's the things that we'd like. Maybe we can collaborate on what that might be. So rather than just simply here reminding people to do it, we'll send out a request to do it.
And just a friendly reminder for everybody to get their lunch order in, so staff resources don't need to remind us that.
And another friendly reminder to show up at Cubberley on Thursday night.
I thought you were going to say for the retreat.
No.
No, that's at Foothills.
Now can I have a motion for adjournment?
Gladly, so moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Thank you.